Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Well, today I have a very special guest in the studio with me today. I have our oldest son, Jason Atkinson, former state senator, author, movie director, movie producer, fly fisherman, cowboy. What am I leaving out here?
Well, clearly not a sharp dresser because we dress the same and we don't live at the same house.
No, well, there we go.
A blue shirt and a black blazer.
There we go. But anyway, good to have you, Jason. And we want to talk about a couple of things today. Jason has authored a book, and I think you'll find it to be a fascinating read. And we want to talk about this Inside Out, Stories of Oregon's Stewards, Unsung Heroes of the Land, and where you can get a copy of that, and a little bit later on about a movie entitled A River Between Us. But this book is not only deals with history, but people. And this is a collection of your adventures, basically.
Well, the genesis of that book was when I took a break from politics. I started writing. I started writing for the Huffington Post, which was odd. And those I'd write an article and they'd take off, and then I would get contacted, would I write about this or that, and I was asked if I would write about a bunch of public lands issues, and I said, how boring. I mean, why would I wouldn't read an article about public lands even if I had written it. But I made a deal. I said, if you let me go all around the state of Oregon and interview people who feel left out of the debate around fish and wildlife and conservation, and let me ask them their thoughts of some of these national issues like the Water and Land Conservation Fund and some of the offshore issues, and let me write story about it, then maybe I'll think about it. And so it ended up being that I got to write about one of my heroes who's 92 years old, Frank Moore, up on the Umpqua, who stormed the beaches at D-Day, and then he's been married now almost 70 years, and they made a film about him that debuted last year, where he actually, storming the beaches up Normandy, he said, when I come back, if I'm still alive and I get to marry my sweetheart, I'm going to fish there and there and there and there. And he went back and he did it. Wow. And you know, I got to write about a friend of mine and some of the, you know, their views up in Astoria and in Central Oregon and northeastern Oregon. So it was a lot of fun, and then the books incidentally took off. It might be going to Europe next, which is interesting, and so off it goes.
Well, a couple of questions first. Where can people get a copy?
Right now, people can get a copy on my website, which is jasonaatkinson.com. Okay. So it's there. It's at the Fielson store in Portland, Oregon. It's at Royal Treatment in Portland. It's about to be with Frank Amato Publications, and then after that we'll see if Amazon. So it's still a little bit early, but that's where it's at. Easiest way is on my website, or actually I give a talk in Medford on the 18th, and I'll have them there.
And so that'll be at the Criterion, I think.
Yeah, and some folks are thinking that that has to do with the film, and I'll play excerpts of the film, but that's not the showing of the film. It's okay. They've asked me to give a talk on the Klamath.
Unsung heroes. So what did you learn from these guys? I mean, I've read the book. I read a couple of the chapters twice. The stories are unbelievable that these people are out there and they're living in this state. But what did you learn from them?
Well, I don't know. It's so much that I learned is that I wanted an audience to learn, and that is that, you know, we live in this hyper-partisan world where if you care about the wild environment, then, you know, the outside, well, then you're on one party, and you're usually urban, and and so there's all those silos, all those definitions, and if you're not, you're over here. But as you know, as you and I know so well, that, you know, if you're a farmer, if you're in agriculture, if you're in rural America somewhere, and your work is done, what do? Well, you go outside and you hunt and you fish, and you do all these things, and so. How can the people who are so most closely associated with the outdoors be completely left out of the debate and considered the bad guys? Mm-hmm. So it was more of an opportunity to start to reshape what I think conservation is in this country, which is largely, what the film is too. But I think one of the things I'm working on, a little preview, is if you look at American history, we've been through 3 times where we've had a major shift in American conservation. The first time was Lewis and Clark and America's greatest taxpayer-funded camping trip, which opened the West. And for good and bad, you can't look back and play, revisional history. I mean, there was good and there was bad. The good, obviously, is that, we all live in Oregon now. The second time is with Teddy Roosevelt and wise use. And if we're going to create the national parks, America's greatest idea, as Ken Burns called it. And then we're going to have a forest service, and we're going to dam a river, and we'll put in a fish hatchery. And you had the way of that we're going to bend nature. 1973 is the third phase of conservation, where Richard Nixon, Republican, signed the Endangered Species Act, and you're going to have at the time there was a public service announcement of a Native American crying on television, it had to do with recycling, and you had Earth Day, and you had all this do-gooderisms in the early 70s. 10 years later in the Northwest, it's a declaration of war. So what I argue is when partisanship stepped in, and rightfully so, because it appeared that the federal government cared more about a species than it did a people. What I'm advocating now as I move around and give talks and books and films and all that stuff is that to go forward in this country now, instead of endangered species and all the lawsuits and all the micro industry that has grown up around those lawsuits, now we move towards endangered habitat. The only difference is that in my world, you have to involve small communities as part of habitat. So you have to care that Lakeview as a community succeeds as much as there's lawsuits around the forest. If you include people in their decisions about their destiny, not only will fish, wildlife, and habitat be better, but so will small communities.
Those who you have interviewed, were they reluctant to tell their story at first, or were they happy to know now their story could be heard?
The nicest probably, I collect letters. And sometimes print emails, but it's nice when somebody hand writes you a letter. In the last chapter, there's a gentleman in there, a hero of mine, who passes away. And I talked to him a couple days before he died, who's one of the last remaining day rider cowboys. And as the book came out, I sent a pre-copy to his wife, his widow, and she sent me the most beautiful letter that one of the most beautiful letters I've ever received, thanking me for getting it right. I had a lot of folks who were a little reluctant to go, what's Atkinson doing? And then they read it and they say, send me 50 copies and I want to get them all out. So it's really interesting. The folks who are in it were shocked that, for some reason, that I got their story right. So that's been a good thing.
All right, before we transition into the movie, where do you think this debate is now? Where is it going? I mean, we're in a shift. We've seen the extremes. The pendulum swings both ways. Where do you see it now?
I think it is rudderless and doesn't have any leaders. I think that the fundraise model that is used on the left is worn and tired. I think there's a whole swath of Americans that feel that being called the bad guy is wrong. And I think that perceptions of how do you manage the natural world in this country are changing. Look at my son, your grandson. He doesn't know. He doesn't know about the endangered species time in Oregon in the 1980s, but he does know not to walk across salmon beds. That's not a political thing. That's just a cultural shift. So I think in this country it's time to redefine how that is, and I think there's new leaders in this debate that have to emerge.
Can we do this? Can we all get along? Can we make this happen?
Only if there's grown-ups. There's not a lot of grown-ups, and there's not a lot of incentive for folks on the left, let's say, to get along with folks on the right, because unless they have a species-specific lawsuit and fundraising model, it doesn't work. So if we've seen on the Klamath, it's amazing to me that, as we'll talk about in the next segment, if you look at the Klamath knot, as it's called, folks on the far left are against it, because they don't get 100% because they can't raise money off of the tragedy. Same thing a little bit to our friends on the far side of the right part of the aisle. But I think if there's grown-ups that say, let's slow down and talk to each other and learn how to listen and are honest brokers, I think people can get along. But there's always going to be sides.
All right, the book is called Inside Out, Stories of Oregon's Stewards and Unsung Heroes of the Land. There's a picture there on the screen. Let me encourage you to go to Jason's website, and that's jasonatkinson.com.
Correct.
And you can get a copy of it there. I tell you one thing you're going to learn from this. You're going to learn, first of all, incredible stories of real people, fascinating bits of history about Oregon that you probably never knew existed, and what's really going on out there. The people who literally live on the land, live from the land, and how they're good stewards of it, and what's happening to them. This book is the beginning of them getting a voice, and let me encourage you to get a copy of it. It is fascinating. Not only do I, for the selfish reason, I want you to get a copy of it, but for the obvious reason, I think that there is something for all of us to learn in this. I don't know, is there a sequel to this? Are you thinking
I don't know. I mean, if it takes off, I'm working on 2 other book concepts right now. One revolving around the film and the real story behind the film, and then one on an idea about organizing politics horizontally rather than vertically, and that's. But is there a sequel? I mean, I'd like to. I mean, if I can go around the state and interview heroes, that'd be great. That'd be great. There's a whole swath of people who said, "Why didn't you talk to me?" And
yeah,
so,
there you
sure,
go.
I'd love to.
All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to give you a little bit of an insight of something that's been in the making for a long time. It's a movie entitled "A River Between Us" that Jason produced. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and special guest today is our oldest son, Jason Atkinson, former state senator and author and filmmaker. Now, we want to introduce to you an incredible adventure. You've been on this how long? How long have you been working on this movie? Well, okay,
4 years.
4 years? It's been that long? All right, and the actual production of it, and it's now done. It's entitled A River Between Us. Before we play the trailer, set it up.
The largest conservation project in American history.
That's a big statement.
Is a statement that we certainly will back up. It happens to be in southern Oregon, and nobody knows that, which is okay. So there's a reason why we didn't talk about it out loud for so many years as we did it. But the largest conservation project in American history, the longest water war in American history, the most divisive Western politics west of the Rockies, is all tied up in this story. And the story isn't about dams, and it's not about ag, and it's not about politics. The story is, if you heal people, they'll heal the river. And that is a culture shift of a statement.
All right, let's play this trailer so you can get a feel for it. It's called A River Between Us.
The Klamath River Basin stands to become the largest river restoration project in United States history. Bigger than the Everglades, bigger than anything we've attempted before.
There are communities hanging on by a thread. We have got to have some stability.
Anybody who's been seriously involved in water issues in this basin has received death threats.
Anyone that could kill and murder hundreds of thousands of fish didn't belong here.
It's neighbor against neighbor that really breaks my heart.
The federal government put them up the river and they created this whole community based on water, and that's a high desert.
They were not here, neither were the coho.
Look at the tribal legends.
Oh, screw the tribal legends.
I think that they still see this as a win for the Indians. I think that scares them.
Well, I think there's racism in this country. I think there's racism in the world. I think the Valley is reflective of that.
No more of this red tape. We say it's white tape.
I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or Tea Party or progressive or green. I don't care. Fix this issue.
No one did anything wrong. It's that these decisions all made sense at the time that they were made, but the problem is they overallocated the basin and created bitter disputes.
People don't even think about what am I living on? Whose back am I living on?
A dozen different ways to make power, but there's only one Klamath River, and there's only one salmon run that God made.
Because you are praying for the wrong thing. You're praying for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You're not praying for the right thing.
I truly believe that when the river is restored, we will see our people heal.
I can't in good conscience go back to that other place. I can't do it.
I really do think that if we can succeed in the Klamath Basin, we can succeed anywhere.
Well, pretty fascinating, and this called The River Between Us. And first of all, when do you expect it to go public and be released?
It will play, and I guess this is the first time it's actually been, the trailer's been on televised, so that's a nice little mark. It should be on theDove. It will be shown as the local feature at the Ashland Independent Film Festival at the end of April, which will be the first time it's shown in Southern Oregon. And we'll probably do a theatrical run after that, surrounding that. We're doing some small screenings around. I was in San Francisco. We're going to do a small one in Portland. And so it'll probably go public in theaters and probably hopefully nationally, which is part of the plan, later in the spring. But just if your audience is curious, it's not at the Criterion in a couple of weeks or next week. It's in April, Southern Oregon, which is great.
All right. It started out to be a documentary about the river, ended up being a unbelievable story about people coming together and seeing, and the term, I don't know if our audience caught it, the largest restoration project in the world. Nothing's been attempted this big. This movie is the catalyst to make that happen. You were changed by making this movie. You interviewed, I don't know how many people, but you interviewed a lot of people, from farmers to ranchers to fishermen to Indian tribes to politicians. I mean, the list went on and on and on. It had a twist for you, didn't it? More than you thought.
Well, you know, we had a couple of issues, and for me, I said the entire time, we're not making something for the region, for Oregon, that's for local. We're making a national story. So make this story matter to someone who takes the subway to work. And I think for the 2.5 years we were actually in production, that we said that every day. So all of the folks, director, all the art directors, director of photography, everybody had a national story in mind. And when you go out on these adventures, it's interesting. One of the things that we did, or was important to me as we wrote, was we want to treat the audience as smart. So many documentaries lead or jade or take the audience somewhere that they're already at. And in order for us to reach somebody that doesn't care about the West, cowboys, Indians, and fish, and takes a subway to work, I very strategically said we're going to make sure that the audience is smart. So we had those heavy things on us, but still there's a journey of discovery. I mean, of course I know the story, I know all the folks, I know, you know, why I'm interested in this But it hit us on a very long trip. I think we were out shooting for 8 days, and it was just, you know, the batteries aren't working, and the place where we're supposed to stay wasn't available, and you know, there's so many variables. And it hit us hard one day that we realized we were seeing people live the Beatitudes. And that was remarkable. And we saw in tests people that we tested it with and who couldn't find this place on a map, but fell completely in love with the fact that something was happening, that people were being touched. So we had audiences, very urban audiences, reacting, and you know, they'd be crying, and I'd say, "What did you like?" Was it I don't know why I like this film so much, you know, and what it was, you know, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are those, the big one was, blessed are those who show mercy. And so you see people who haven't got along, who multi-generationally haven't even liked each other, start to live the Beatitudes. And when we figured out that that was the story, the film grabbed a life of its own.
All right, we have another little trailer, I guess we could say, but it takes what you just mentioned, the Beatitudes, and kind of puts it in a short video form. Let's take a look at that.
When we started the film, I knew we were making a national film. I wanted to make a people film about this notion, if you heal these people, they will heal this river, which in turn is the largest conservation project ever attempted in our history. And with the belief that these people are the very best in America and represent the very best in America. Well, those are pretty high notions. But what I didn't know, starting, that I know now, is that we really made a film about the Beatitudes, and we were watching people live that out. Blessed are the peacemakers, those who mourn, those who show mercy, those who are humble. They start inheriting multi-generational issues, and they heal at the end by playing out the Beatitudes. And when we realized that, we realized we were sitting on something far bigger than a fish movie, far bigger than a river movie, far bigger than something that's in a documentary. We were actually watching people heal.
All right, and we're going to take a quick break. I want to come back because there's definitely a real spiritual thread through all of this. The Beatitude, I think, kind of gives the hint. But in the process of making this movie, you saw that. You saw the walls begin to come down ever so slowly. And they were tested, no question about it. But what could happen if people actually practiced the Beatitudes, and what could happen to a nation, to a region? And I'll have Jason explain that. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and delighted to have our son in the studio with us today, Jason Atkinson. He's authored a book called Inside Out. Let me encourage you to get a copy of this, Stories of Oregon's Stewards and Unsung Heroes of the Land. There's a picture of it. You can go to jasonaatkinson.com and get a copy of it there. And this is kind of it just says a lot about everything we're talking about here today, but it's also going to give you a part of Oregon that perhaps you may not know exists. And these are people who are out there living and living on the land and good stewards of the land. So get a copy of this book. And then the movie called A River Between Us, which will be released sometime this spring, nationwide, deals with what could be the largest restoration project in the world, dealing with the Klamath Basin and the Klamath River, from the Klamath Basin all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. But it's really a story about people coming along and getting along. And you mentioned the Beatitudes. We showed you that little clip there of the Beatitudes. So I've seen the movie. I've had a little bit special privileges to see the movie. The hardness between the various players is beginning to break down. Where do you think this is going? I mean, it was pretty phenomenal to see these people realize their destinies in their own hands, not the government's.
Right. Yeah. You know, since we've got the feature-length portion of the film done, in the last 2 months, we've been testing and working and getting ready to roll it out. But the film has been used to actually hold groups of folks together in this coalition. So you have 46 groups of people. 46. That's hard. You can't get 46 people in the same room to ever agree. They got 46 groups of people over a decade to come together. And we've seen the film be used as a way to really strengthen that coalition and keep people together and remind each other of their motivations. But where it's going is it's just a very clear time in the United States history where the Klamath isn't the issue. The Klamath is the snapshot. And the Klamath really does represent who we all are as Americans. If we do nothing, that's who we are. If we stay partisan on everything, that's who we are. If we dare to be big again, then that's who we are. And I think when this story gets out, the way we're seeing people respond to the real people side of this is we're on, very clearly you're going to be on one side of history or the other. But the country is not going to be the same. This is one of those pivotal times, and this is a pivotal issue when we make it a national story, that this really says who we all are. So I am an optimist, and I believe and love public service. So I have to believe in optimism. I think 99.9% of people look at the Klamath and they look at it very closely, and they look at it as a local issue, and they look at it as a partisan issue, and they say, well, it's never going to happen. It's very fear-based. It's very, if you step back to the level where the rest of America is, I think it's time where the country is going to be great again.
The consequences if they don't do this, if they don't come together.
Status quo, missed opportunity, missed history, and the opportunity to keep people groups divided from each other. One of the most telling things is, in all the interviews we were doing, one of the interviews was very, person is not in the film, but as soon as the camera was turned off, he really told us what he thought about those Indians. And you got to step back for a second and say, wait a minute. There's a lot of ill that can go around on a variety of sides, or about those environmentalists, about those irrigators, about those ranchers. As long as you separate people like that, it's easy to demean them and to tear people apart. When you see people like in the film, I asked this guy, it was really pretty clever, because I'd go around and I'd ask the Indians, for Native American friends of mine, I'd say, so you keep mentioning the Creator. Do you pray to the Creator? Yeah. Well, who is the Creator? Well, it's probably Jesus. Okay. The guys upriver, who do they pray to? What, you think you're praying to the same guy? Do you think you're praying for the same thing? So you're both praying to the same guy for victory over the other person. Well, what's going to happen there? It's interesting. And so, those are the dynamics that start to happen.
Well, be looking for it. It'll be out sometime this spring, in April, A River Between Us. And if you want a copy of this book, I think what you ought to do is get a copy of the book, read it, before you see the film. I think it kind of sets the platform for the film. You can go to jasonaatkinson.com and order the book inside out and get a copy of it. There's a picture on the screen, those watching on the Dove TV. Well, thank you, Jason. This is fascinating to say the least, and I can't wait till we can play the whole thing on the Dove TV.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
And I want to say to the Dove viewers this morning, you saw something that nobody else has ever seen yet. You got to see the trailer on broadcast, so that's good. All right,
Great
thanks.
day.
All right, we'll be right back.